So hi, I'll introduce myself. For starters, I'm David Gilbert, Director at Block Projects, and welcome Joe, who's one of the graduating students from Sheffield Hallam BA Fine Art.
Hi there.
Hi Joe. So this is one of a number of films we're making, short films we're making just with some of this year's graduates whose work is featured on the Block Projects website. So hi, thanks for being here, Joe. Firstly, could you maybe just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, your background?
Okay, so my name's Joe. I'm a practicing artist who's just completed, as it was mentioned, a 3-year BA Fine Art course, and I work mostly in abstract with photography. So I combine painting and photography as my main part of my practice.
Great. So how did you come to be an artist? It sounds like a silly question maybe, but I'm always interested to find out how people kind of came to art and what their journey's been.
So when I was younger, especially sort of in lower secondary school, I didn't think I was very good at it. And I was told that I wasn't very good at it. So I used to hide under the table when it came to handing in work, because they would love everybody else's work and then they'd get to mine and tell me what was wrong with it. And perhaps on, retrospect, that was to encourage me to be a bit more experimental. But it wasn't until I started using sort of softer materials like charcoal and working on black paper that I started to realize that there was something within that and the physicality of making that gave me a passion for it. And so I decided to do it for A level. And I really started to develop into different styles and be more expressive in my mark makings. And I suppose that's where I got the joy from, and sort of using art to express my inner feelings without having to use words. I think that was really important for me, because a lot of the time I don't really know what to say, but I can express how I feel visually. So to be able to use something like that as almost a form of therapy was where my interest began. And then, since then, from abstract painting that you can interpret as anything, I decided to make it more personal about me. And I suppose over the 3 years of uni, that's where my work came from canvas and vibrant to sort of more focused, as can see on the block work, about myself and about my experience, especially as being transgender in this time period, and wanting to be more open about myself, but through my work, without hiding behind it as much. I think trying to actually express myself through it. So
That's really interesting. Do you think that's because it sounds as if you've gone, in terms of subject matter, the opposite way to the way that many people go. You've gone from abstract towards figuration, rather than from figuration towards abstraction. So do you think that's about a kind of embodiment, an impulse to embody yourself in a way in the work?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, with the time period of uni, especially in the last sort of year, was not only was I aiming to finish and complete my course, but that's also when I started to transition. So the work was a direct reflection of my physical experience. And with being in lockdown and with not being able to have any outside influences, I was forced really to completely focus on myself. And in a lot of ways, that was really quite challenging, but I think it had some quite visually rewarding results for me. And it showed me a different way to execute my work without any kind of other sources or means. Or obviously I had the internet and I was looking at other people's work and sort of letting that influence some of the styles and techniques, but it was more sort of, you only have yourself, so you may as well really dig into that and see what that's about. And it definitely showed me a lot.
I think that's really resourceful, because so many people must have thought, what was the point of me being at university? It's all about the social aspect and that interaction with other people, talking about your work, and kind of really, being in the studio with other people as well. So being in a kind of solitary state as a student must have been quite an interesting experience. Do you think that really had an effect on what you ended up producing?
Yes, I think so, because without other people, like the studio vibe is fantastic. And I know that from first and second year, and it can really change the direction of what you're doing with your work. And we've had tutorials and feedback from other people through online, but I felt there was like a lack of genuine feel for the work, because if you can't see the texture, you lose a lot of the meaning of what my work is, which is obviously self-expressionate and passionate through the brushstrokes, which is, I suppose, why I felt it important to use a textual close-up for the block exhibition.
I guess that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I mean, when sort of reproduced on the web, everybody's work is the same size, essentially, depending on how big your screen is. So I guess I was kind of wondering, are these quite big paintings?
They're actually really small.
Are
And
they?
the idea behind them being so small is that you really have to look and pick up on the nuances, because my experience of being transgender and my experience of transitioning has been quite a slow and painful and nuanced experience. It's not been like slap in your face, you have to look at this. So I suppose I wanted to represent that experience and the slight of the changes through the size, so that people really have to engage with it. It's not that they're immersed, but that they have to focus in on it. And that's kind of where I was going. And I quite like the intimacy of that small scale as well.
Yeah, I always think that's a really interesting sort of aspect of work. You could paint really big, and then it becomes the experience of the work is not an intimate one. It could be a whole room full of people having the same experience simultaneously. But that kind of smallness means that it's a very intimate relationship between the viewer and the work. And I guess the gestural aspect and the kind of texture nature of the surface is that kind of designed to draw people closer to it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the foundations of my work is always the photography first and the composition that comes through that. So I try to recreate real moments through images that I experience myself. So say for the work that I've produced for this exhibition is of me sort of sat holding myself and feeling vulnerable. And that's a part of my life that I don't tend to show people in social situations. And the brushstrokes in some ways accentuate that vulnerability, and in other ways also act as a mask or as a veil to protect me from that vulnerability as well. So they kind of do two separate things at the same time, and depending on your initial interpretation of it is depending on which way you receive that. So whether you receive the aggression and the frustration first, or whether you receive the I need to hide, is kind of both. So I quite like the malleable and the flexibility of the paint that goes over that photography that allows people to interpret it that way.
Well, that's really interesting. So the painting is obscuring the photography.
Yes, and from really my work this year has progressed from my purely black and white film photography of my second year, which was also small scaled, and that's how I wanted to continue experimenting with that, because the way that people reacted to the composition was sort of like, I don't know whether I should actually be looking at this because it feels so personal, but yet it's also so intriguing, and that's what I wanted to build on. And I suppose with the paint, it makes it more difficult to really see what's going on, but also at the same time, I hope that viewers will get more emotion from it, because I've done something to the photography afterwards. It's got more of a process, more of an impact, and I've decided where those parts of my body are accentuated and also where people aren't allowed to look because it's been masked. And I suppose the intention of that is to give sort of a passion or an exemplify the strength and the complexity of the emotion behind my experience. And I hope that that's what's translated through the work.
What kind of responses have you had from people to the work?
Mostly the intention that I have has paid off, I think.
Right.
And with especially some of the titles of my work as well. So I've got a piece where I'm sat or I'm looking towards the shower and I've binded my chest, and that's a form of hiding. And I've sort of accentuated the lines around my body. And I have my sketchbook here, actually. I don't know how well you will be able to see this. I'll try and hold it up as clear as I can. And this piece is called Dysphoric Nudity. And it's all about hiding parts of myself, as well as sort of displaying that rawness and using materials sort of absent-mindedly, but letting them guide where I think they should go is quite an important part of the process of my making. So the feedback I got from that really was that they enjoyed the layering and they wanted to know more about what purpose that had. And I hope that through my writing as well, that becomes sort of more clear, that it's about accentuating something and hiding something else at the same time. And I think from the feedback I've had that that's been achieved.
Right. Well, it looks like a really interesting body of work. Have you completed that body of work, or do you think that's a body of work that's still evolving that you're going to continue to develop?
I think because of where I'm at with my transition, and I'm still in quite early stages, I definitely think that because it's quite a broad subject around myself and my experience of my identity, I think that will forever have the opportunity to keep evolving. And I don't intend to see, with my bodies of work, they kind of merge seamlessly. They're not so much like independent things about different topics. They're more sort of evolutions of my findings from each works I've done before that. So I would say that there's definitely room to continue with that and play more with the materials and see where that leads me. And the more I grow as a person, I'm interested to see how that evolves through the work. So definitely going to continue with that.
I guess with kind of going through 3 years of BA, coming to the end of it, it's maybe the end of one thing, but obviously it's the start of something else. So I wonder what your plans are for the future then. Are you thinking about maybe further study, or are you going to be pursuing gallery representation, something like that?
I would like to get to that point eventually, definitely. And I think for now, immediately in the future, I think I'm going to go back to my initial abstract painting and see what the effect of my current work has on purely going back to expressional painting again, and see if I can get some interest with that. I want to set up my own website and start selling work, and I'll see where that takes me. And I want to make connections, and hopefully, I mean, obviously the dream is to one day be an artist name that people know or at least heard of. And I'd like to think that I have the ability to keep progressing, and I definitely want to make art a big part of my future.
Great. What a fantastic note to end on. I really hope that's the case. Wish you every success with that.
Thank you very much.
So I'll say thank you, Joel. It's been really, really interesting to talk to you, and thanks for sharing the work.
Of course, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.